if you're watching this video and you're saying, well, is this the right time for me to go private equity? I think that if you're running a $3+ million EBITDA company, you obviously have enough systems to manage that type of flow. I'm not afraid to ask what I'm worth.
But once the paperwork's in, they tell you, hey, this is what we'll give for you, right? Don't forget the details about what your job duties and what you're making, what your bonus structures are. Do not forget, there's a lot more of them than they are of you. Welcome to Chasing Millions podcast. I'm Eric.
And I'm Josh.
And today, we're trying to talk about private equity. There's been a lot of buzz. Everywhere I go, I seem to hear just a little bit of something talking about, hey, this private equity guy is coming to visit us. And in our little realm, that's kind of the next step. Once you run out of your own capital, what do you got to have?
More money.
Somebody else's money.
Yeah.
Right?
And you don't have to you can start it out with private equity. A lot of people do.
You can. We didn't choose that same route, and we still haven't quite went the private equity, but we are so versed at this point. We're bringing them in. We're talking to them. We're figuring out the do's and the don'ts. We're asking a lot of questions. We're learning about a lot of things, but in that, we're going to teach you guys what we have learned that you cannot miss.
Yep. Today, we're talking about simple, not really simple, a few steps of what private equity is looking for, how they evaluate your business, what you need to have prepared for them to evaluate your business.
Which is very, very important.
Yep. And then contracts.
Woo.
You know, with money comes terms
That's
and
right.
conditions and strings.
And sometimes when they have the money, they're holding the cards. So you're going to learn some things that we're learning, and hope you take away some good information from this, and I hope it helps. So
Start with one. Let's start with the main topic. What's the number one thing when we have private equity guys flying these fancy jets and we're picking them up and we're like, man, we're going to get one of these days. And you know, that meeting is costing us and costing them like $70,000, $80,000, because some of these meetings that we've had, there have been 4 or 5 jets fly in
for sure.
from different parts of the world, New York, California, Chicago, all
And they
over.
all converge together. They're like, all right, we're going to meet. We're all going to be here in our little jets.
Yep.
Right?
So the number one thing you need to understand when you go into private equity and you start interviewing different equity groups is, what are they looking for? How do they evaluate your business? So what I figured out is the number one thing they're looking for is a level EBITDA that makes it worth their time. And usually that, from my experiences, and the consistent over the last 7, 8 private equity, actually it's up to 10 private equity groups that I have spoken to, they like to have a minimum of 4 million EBITDA.
Yep.
Anything less than 4 million EBITDA, what I found out, they're really not interested in. What is EBITDA?
Well, EBITDA is, if you didn't know, it's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
That's right.
That's right.
So to put it in simple format, that's pretty much how every single private equity group I've spoken to and had in lengthy conversations, that's how they evaluate your business.
And I think they have to. They have to put a business, and this is my perspective, but they have to have a scale, right, of, hey, what is this business worth, right? Because they're levering some of that business, right? And then they're calculating it on some spreadsheet that we're starting to learn a lot about, but we're not going to get into those details today. But they have to have a calculation in there to be able to tell what your business is worth. And it's kind of like a global scale, to my understanding, of valuation of businesses. They use the EBITDA. So to Josh's point, right, is that these private equity groups, they come in and they're going to want to do a valuation of your company, and they're going to give your valuation an EBITDA number, right? And in that EBITDA number, your business, depending on a lot of factors, and some we're going to cover today, will have a multiple of that EBITDA number. Meaning, if our business was valued at 1 million EBITDA, in our little realm of service business got traded at a multiple of 3, and this is just a hypothetical, this is not accurate, is 1 million times 3 is 3 million. So to get you just a very rudimentary understanding of what we're talking about, that is it.
Exactly. So you guys watching, like Eric and I, you know, if you're a small business, and I say anything less than 10 million is considered small in my eyes, and that's 10 million of EBITDA, right? So most people, how do you get to the number of EBITDA? One thing that you need to take in consideration before you start these meetings is because you're getting in bed with very intelligent people. These guys are sharks. These guys are smart. They want to churn and burn. They want to return on their capital in time, right? So you need to understand your finances very, very, very well, right? You have to go in there and understand all the add backs. And let's talk about add backs real quick. What is add back? An add back is, hey, I have a personal expense I'm running through the business. I had a vacation I ran through the business. I pay for my DirecTV. I pay for my Netflix account. Those are all things that you're not going to get when you get in bed with a private equity group. But it also is one of those things that you can add back in to the bottom line, that EBITDA number, what you are going to get paid for, times whatever multiplier you can get out of it. So understand your finances, understand your add backs. If you don't have a really good accounting system put in place, it might not,
Depending on the level of your business,
exactly.
That's important.
But you might want to hire somebody, an outside consulting company, to come in there and really evaluate your company. Understand if you're set up for taking your company private equity. My question is, when I always get my answer is, somebody always asks me, why do I want to go private equity? Well, the nice thing about going private equity is you get a large sum of money to go grow through acquisition. So growing through acquisition and that organically takes a lot of capital.
That's right.
Right? But it's actually the fastest way to grow. It's very, very tough to grow a company to be a substantial size through organic growth. It takes a lot of time. Sometimes it takes your whole lifetime focus to grow an organic company. So why are we going to look at private equity? It's not the fact that we don't have the access to the capital. It's the fact that we think that we can get access to a larger sum of capital, take off our personal guarantees, and grow through acquisition and put them in our system.
That's correct.
But to do that, the only thing you're guaranteed in private equity is your first initial out, right? And then you're banking on the come. You're banking that you can purchase companies, integrate them, right, into your system and not fall apart.
That's right. You're banking on your own abilities, because at that point you're pretty much working for them to some degree. And there could be some other funny deals out there that we haven't heard of, right? But ultimately what I understand and what Josh understands is that the people that are holding the money are usually holding the majority of the cards. So you better believe in your systems, and they better be in place, and you better understand how they operate and how they work, and that you believe in them that much, because you may get your first churn, right? But if you are not meeting their standards that they're going to give you in advance, and you don't meet those, you're just as dispensable as anybody else, which you weren't before, right? So since we're talking about valuations, what else is important in a valuation? And what I've learned is how does your business look from the outside in, right? What I mean by that is, if somebody goes into your yard and you have an unorganized yard, your people are not in a uniform such as this or something to the similar, and your trucks aren't well maintained, then how do you think the business is really operating? Do you think he's going to believe your accounting that you made 40% net profit whenever nothing in the whole entire yard looks organized and efficient? Probably not. Well, so what I've learned, right, is there is a bit of visual aspect to a potential gain in multiple of that evaluation of your company.
Well, these guys are smart. They understand if you have a really, really strong bottom line, right? And they look out in the yard. In our case, we're in the service business, so we have a lot of equipment, and they see that we have a fleet of trucks that have not been maintained well, right? Well, obviously, we're putting as many dollars to the bottom line because we're really, we're not focusing on, right, maintaining our fleet. And ultimately, it's going to cost them capital, which is going to affect their bottom line. These guys are smart, guys. You have to understand your value. You have to understand where you are as a company. You have to have a good direction where you want to go with this capital that you could potentially get from them. So when you go in there with a good game plan. These guys don't mess around. There's a lot of them. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of private equity groups around the nation. And they're usually all based around finance or accounting backgrounds, right? Yep. The thing that I think if you're watching this video and you're saying, well, is this the right time for me to go private equity? Or am I good enough to go private equity? I think that if you're running a $3+ million EBITDA company, you obviously have enough systems in place to manage that type of flow, right? Of services or retail or whatever the item and service and may be. Understand your value. There's a lot more money than there are good operators. So one thing after interviewing not dozens, 7 to 10 private equity companies and many more conversations, that's 7 to 10 physical people flying in and looking at us, is understand your value. There's a lot more money on the market than there are deals. And one thing that over time is I got a lot more comfortable with is I'm not afraid to ask what I'm worth.
Well, I think that leads directly into the next point I would want to talk about that's very important for you guys that are listening, is defining, if you do go down this rabbit hole, that make sure that you are defining your role post-sale, right? And what that means, what your terms are. If you're not able to meet some, threshold of dollars that you're looking for, maybe something in the post-sale terms and that role can produce for you, right? So what I mean by that is, once the paperwork's in and they tell you, hey, this is what we'll get for you, right? Don't forget the details about what your job duties and what you're making, what your bonus structures are, right? And all those fine details that a lot of people, that if you don't do the research, so if you're listening and you're right there on that verge, do the research, post-sale roles, different things that you can offer. Because like Josh said a minute ago, right, is there's nothing more important that you need to understand is that there's a lot more of those guys out there than there are people like Josh and I.
Exactly.
So defining that post-sale role, making sure that it's going to meet what your personal standards are and what you can do and operate under is very, very critical.
And be realistic with yourself. A lot of these guys come in here, and women, these private equity groups, and they come in here and they have unrealistic expectations of what we think they can do in this industry. For you and I, we're in the portable restroom, roll-off dumpster, fencing, and shipping container business, right? They're wanting you to roll up. When I mean roll up, they're wanting you to acquire anywhere from 3 to 5 businesses a year and integrate those in and rebrand your company. That's a tough thing to do.
All while not losing any margins.
Yeah, all by maintaining margins that you showed them in the very first place that you think you can maintain. And sometimes these guys, in my opinion, have unrealistic expectations. So define your role. Define where you fit into this group, because they have their own roles and if you team up the right private equity group, they're going to have some offset skill sets that you may not have on your team immediately. So define your role, understand what your value is, and then we're getting ready to go into another key topic is when you do start acquiring these companies and you get the contract, I would say trust these guys because you're about to get in bed with them and you're about to sell your company to them ultimately, right? And take a lesser stance of percentage of ownership. But hire outside counsel. Make sure you're represented right. We've heard too many horror stories about people selling to private equity and teaming up private equity and they got outsmarted.
Yeah.
Right? We've consulted a lot of different people, and a lot of them, the consistent message I continue to hear is, I wish I would have hired somebody from the outside to represent me to make sure that our deal is shored up. I didn't get my bonus payout like I thought because there was a technicality. I didn't get my end result like I thought because I didn't understand the contract as well as I thought. So hire outside counsel, make sure it's very, very defined. And ultimately, it's just like anything else. Once you guys know you're on the same page and it's in writing, the relationship's going to be a lot stronger going forward.
I don't disagree. So that brings me to my next point that you guys need to understand, and that's make sure you're retaining your key talented people that are around you. Not only you're going to be trying to find key talented people, depending on the situation, but if you have key talent in your system right now, in your company, in your system, in your processes, you better hold on to them, right? Because you're going to need every one of those you can have. Even if you don't go private equity, I mean, you need to have a good culture and a culture that has the ability to retain key, integrated, and key talented people.
Well, your people are everything, right?
100%.
Anybody can go buy portable restrooms, roll-off dumpsters, and a few trucks, right? It's what makes what makes those things better than the next guy that has the same assets? Well, it's the service, it's the people, it's the billing, it's the technology, it's all the things that go into making a company what it is, right? When you go into private equity and you have that 3-4 million plus EBITDA and you are marketable to private equity at that point in time, you obviously have some good skill sets around you, right? The kicker is, my advice to you is to make sure you're on the same page with your team and be open and honest. You don't want to hit your team from left field and let them know, oh, by the way, we went private equity and now you're working for this guy, or you're working for us, but now there's going to be a whole different set of pressures. You have to make sure that you and your team are on the same page.
Well, there was one more main key point that I wanted to make, and you probably remember, I don't remember the exact specifics, but some of the people that we talked to on the private equity side, they actually carved out a section of
ownership,
right, for key integral people. So what I'm saying is that they were smart enough on the private equity side to realize how important that not only you, the business owner, but your key individuals that you believe are integral to the success of now private equity company coming in, right? That they carve out a section of equity in that business for you to be able to set parameters around, with their help, I'm sure, in giving these individuals, these key individuals, mind you, some bit of equity and some blood equity, we'll call it, right, into that to kind of guarantee and streamline that they're going to stick with you.
Exactly. You know, ultimately, the private equity guys don't want to give you 50, 80, 100, 200, whatever the number may be, millions of dollars, if your team's going to fall apart, right? And then they invested money in something that didn't last, and it's a fly-by-night company. They want your team they want you to be successful because that's how they're going to get a rate of return for them and their shareholders. But one thing that we need to also hit on when we say retain talent culture, right? Just because you get a humongous capital injection, maintain your culture, keep your standards, keep that, whatever that culture may be, keep that intact. But with acquiring companies, you're going to find some key talent with those companies you're acquiring. That's going to be key to your success.
Oh, for sure. And you have to, and I think that's an innate skill set that most top end business owners, they have to have, is, you know, the ability to spot, you know, his key talent and understanding. You hear like all these interviews that I watch with Elon Musk talking about how he interviews people, and, you know, it's interesting that a lot of times you hear him say, well, it's gut feeling.
Yep.
Right. And what I mean, all that is a lot of times it's just an innate ability and feeling on understanding people who have talent.
Exactly.
Right? And saying, hey, you know, I hired guys mid-interview, and you've been in there with me, right? And those guys are still with us today, and a lot of those guys are running all of our operations, right? But it is so critical to retain that key talent, right? And in private equity, from our understanding, they do in some cases carve out for that, and that does help retain those people.
Yeah, so put some key metrics like you put in place for bonus programs, equity ownership. There's all different types of things you can do to keep your good people around, and I would highly suggest that you sit down and take the time to do that.
Yeah.
So let's go back onto one more topic is, you know, and this probably goes back to the very first bullet point that we kind of made, was your due diligence.
Yep. What does that mean? And maybe most people may not know what due diligence means.
Due diligence, they're going to pick you apart every little aspect of your life. They're going to know who your family is. They're going to know how many kids you got. They're going to ask you every little question. They want to know why they're going to give you millions of dollars, why you're worthy of investing in.
Yep.
So don't take what they're asking personal. These guys are not, this is not a personal thing to them. This is a business transaction. So just be organized, be professional. You know, you're asking for a lot of money. They're willing to invest in it to you if they believe in your systems and who you are. So they're trying to get it. The one thing you need to take in consideration when you're interviewing private equity groups is they're trying to get to know you in a very short amount of time.
Yep.
So they're going to ask you a lot of questions. My advice to you is ask them a lot of questions.
Yep.
You know,
be prepared.
One thing I was taught by a friend of ours is they always flaunt how much money they have and how much their fund is. My question is, one thing I've been asking them is, well, show me. You know, If I'm going to sign over a portion of my business to you, I want to see that the money's there for me to go out and invest. So show me the money.
Mm-hmm.
Show me
It's a simple question to ask.
Yeah, you want to see everything in my life, what's going on, my finances, my everything.
Yeah. So to round out due diligence, I mean, they're going from everything from your personal characteristics to your family,
Potential liabilities.
Yeah, potential liabilities, to your books, to your equipment, to every little piece of the pie that is surrounding your business, to include yourself.
And
right?
be
Many
prepared.
people.
They don't like delays because delays in their eyes show that you're not organized. So the faster that when they request information, the faster you can get the information to them. It shows that you're organized. It shows that you're prepared. And it shows that, hey, I am a good person to invest a lot of money in. I can get you this data that you're requesting. I already have it. It's already readily available. I already have a lot of these metrics put in place. We can send this to you very quickly.
Yep.
So last thing that I think, well, there's a couple more topics, but last key point is negotiate terms beyond the price. And what I mean by that, this is a perfect example between Eric and I. I own the majority of on-call services rentals. Eric has minority stake, but Eric wants to grow within on-call services rentals, right? So he's going to negotiate his own deal with the private equity group, as he should for him and his family, right?
Yep.
That could be rolling over a percentage of your purchase price when you initially sell out to a private equity company. That could be putting a very strategic bonus program in place. That could be putting an equity levels of equity stakes in place when you meet KPIs, right? There's so many different ways that you can structure this. Get creative, have fun with it. Just because you might be a minority owner like Eric does not mean you cannot negotiate yourself a great deal that's going to have a large impact in a very positive way for you and your family going forward.
Yep. And that all ties back to, are you key, right? And it all depends on yourself, right? If you're in my shoes, like in this exact example, right, they're going to realize really quick, right, of how key of an individual I am, just like they are on Josh, right? And we have our own special delineation of duties that we do, and he needs me like I need him, and I need him like he needs me, right? Well, regardless of ownership and where we're at now, the level of expertise and understanding is similar, right, in some degree per our skill sets. But what I'm getting at is that just because I own a minority here and he owns a majority here right now, when we do this valuation and we're setting up these negotiating terms for individuals like myself and Josh, that keep that into consideration, right? Is it just because I'm making X now and he's making this right now, right? If we're going and we're rolling our stuff back over in this particular case.
And when you mean by roll back over, if they bought us, I'm just throwing out numbers. If they bought you $10 million, you're going to roll over $2 million into the new private equity fund.
Yep. Thank you for explaining that. But back to this, is negotiating your terms, right? Is your terms for your individual self, right? Is it make sure you're making a good deal for yourself, understanding your value, your own personal value and what you bring to the table. And do not forget that, like I said earlier and Josh said, is that there's a lot more of them than they are of you.
Yes.
So what does that mean? That means you are of high value. So don't forget that in your negotiating terms, is that the power is in your hands to some degree. So don't forget that.
Yeah, and don't get
greedy.
Yeah.
Don't get greedy. Like you're trying to make a deal, right? Make sure it's worth it. But at the end of the day, the value is here and in here.
100%. So let's recap private equity. Why would you want to go private equity? I'm going to speak from my position why I would like to, I'm not saying I'm going to go private equity 100%. Let's get that straight. What I am doing right now is saying I'm interviewing a lot of different private equity groups to say, what are they looking at? What are these guys looking at in private equity world? How can I adjust my business to meet their models that when I do decide to exit, I can get the highest value for my time, right? So why do you go private equity? Well, for Eric and I, we have a lot of personal guarantees on all of our loans, and that's with equipment and trucks and acquisitions we bought out. One key positive thing that you would do that happens when you go private equity, more than likely you get all your personal guarantees wiped off.
Yep. And what that means in simple terms is that if something defaults, you're not guaranteed to pay that amount.
or a wreck, or there's 1,000 ways that businesses go down for any which way or another, but you get those off. The second thing private equity allows you to do is more than likely you're going to have a lot more capital to go acquire businesses and grow with private equity funding.
Yeah, and in our perfect example, right, is that when you would use bank financing, that there to some degree there's only so far you can go, right? And if your visions are further than that, you got to use likely banks to get to that point, and then you have to make a personal decision, right? Of, hey, do I want to ride this out? This train's great. I don't have to do a whole lot. I've set up great systems, great people. I can just chill out, do my thing, go to Cabo and get a house with my family there and just live there and hope for the best. Cross your fingers, right? Or, you can have higher visions and you say, hey, I know I can do this. I understand this now. And, I'm going to find the right deal, find the right thing. And we're going to double down. I'm going to put my equity back in. We're going to go for this full fledged, set my parameters like we're talking about, understanding your valuations, understanding your roles, make sure you retain your key talents, prepare for your diligence, right? The whole gamut.
You're just putting nitrous oxide in your system that you've already created, right? You're just saying what it's going to take me to do in 20 years on my own, I can do in 3 to 5 with a capital injection.
That's right.
So lastly, why would you want to go private equity? The last thing that I figured out personally, being in a lot of these meetings over the phone and in person, like I said, it was 7 to 10 of them they're running into each other now, and many more phone calls, many more phone calls, is in our industry, a company of our size will trade around anywhere from 5 to 7 EBITDA multiples. And when you consolidate a lot of companies, like-kind companies, into one, you're ultimately, in theory, you're going to get a higher EBITDA multiple. So right now we're X dollars. We're going to be traded at 5 to 7 EBITDA multiple. We go roll up 5 or 6 on calls. Now we're worth, like we discussed last time, the guy was sitting in that table right there. He said the largest EBITDA multiple with like-kind industries at that 25 million EBITDA was 12 EBITDA multiple. Mm-hmm. That's what makes it so lucrative, is rolling up companies is basically energy, right? And big companies want to write big checks. Yep. So from my standpoint is I can go take systems that you and I have built, roll up some companies, take our private personal guarantees off, and then get that EBITDA multiple where it's enterprise value, whatever that number is, and get a higher EBITDA multiple later on down the road. Yep. So we're creating more value for our time. And ultimately, that's how I look at it. I'm 37 years old. I'm trying to create the highest value for my time possible. So recap. Private equity can be the right choice, and it can be a really wrong choice. You have to evaluate your own situation, your own skill. You have to look yourself in the mirror and figure out if this team's willing to stick by you, because there's going to be a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. And you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, is this something I want to go do myself? Because you're losing a lot of control with private equity, right? You're losing a lot of personal control if you are the majority owner or any kind of owner of a company.
Which is probably the deal breaker for a lot of people. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Control is a big deal, right? Especially when you've created a successful business already that you're in full control of. Control is a big thing. So hope this helps a lot of you guys. If you're not subscribed already, like this video, subscribe for us. We got a lot more fun stuff to come. And like I said, we're going to bring good business knowledge to y'all. See you next time.